I'm going to show how to replace brake pads on a 2011 Nissan Altima. I purchased these pads at a local auto parts store. I made sure new clips came with the pads. I also purchased brake grease that comes in a couple packets that's good for one job. Park your car on a solid flat surface and apply the emergency brake. Locate the lug nuts on the front wheel. Most likely there will be one lug nut that requires a special socket. This socket is usually kept in the glove compartment. Using the tire tool that came with the car, I break loose each lug nut. Do not take them completely off, just give them a quarter turn apiece. Next, jack the car up until the wheel is off the ground. Then lower the car onto a jack stand. The lug nuts can now be completely removed, as well as the wheel. At this point, I turn the steering wheel to make the back side of the caliper easier to access. You will now locate the caliper mounting bolts. These will have to be removed to take the caliper off. Loosen the bolts using a socket wrench. Then remove them while holding the caliper in place with the other hand. You do not want to drop the caliper. The weight of the fall could damage the brake lines. Slowly pull the caliper off using both hands. To keep the caliper out of the way and from the risk of falling, wire it to the spring above. Using a flathead screwdriver, you can now pry the outside brake pad out of its channel. Repeat the same process on the inside brake pad. Once the brake pads have been removed, you can now detach the clips. Grasp the upper clip with your fingers and pull straight down. You can now install the new clip in reverse fashion. Next, remove the lower clip and replace it in the same way. In this situation, the rotor was inspected and didn't need turned. It's in pretty good shape, but you will need to clean it very well on the outside and on the inside. The brake pads can now be installed. Slide the brake pad into the channel of the clips. You may have to manipulate the pieces to make it fit. Repeat this process with the brake pad on the inside. Next, I locate the caliper pins. These are where the mounting bolts were unscrewed earlier. These are recognizable by the rubber boots that encase them. Simply grasp the end of the pin and pull straight out. Hold back the rubber boot so that you don't damage it when you pull the pin. Wipe off the old grease from each pin. Liberally apply lubrication to each pin using the brake grease. Insert the pins back into place. Next, you will need to compress the piston back into the caliper. You will need to span the piston using a flat board. I like to use the old brake pads. Lay it across the face of the piston and clamp it into place using a large C-clamp against the back of the caliper. Compress by turning the clamp until the piston has been seated all the way in. Once seated, remove the clamp and then unwire the caliper from the spring. The caliper can now be returned to its original position, housing the brake pads. Next, secure it into place with the caliper mounting bolts. Once hand-threaded, finish off by tightening with a socket. It's recommended to use a torque wrench and follow proper specifications. You can now straighten the wheel and return the tire back in place. Do this in the reverse order that you took it off. Now that this side is done, you will repeat the whole process on the other side. Once the other side is finished, the last thing you'll do is pump the brakes. You will pump it slowly until it feels firm. Then take it for a test drive.